Over the past few decades, horror has been overlooked by the general public and even the Academy for that matter. As a genre, it's not to be taken seriously, which is insane as some of the first films ever made are horror. Nowadays, we see a lot of these same themes that were once revolutionary being thrown into every horror film imaginable and call it a day. It's not like I fully hate modern horror. In fact, a lot of them I really enjoy. Some of them are my favorite films of all time. It's just there have been several reoccurring issues in modern horror that I've been wanting to take a further look at. Starting with, when the topic of modern horror comes up, people usually jump to mention the Conjuring franchise, A24 films, and many others, but whenever I think about modern horror, I usually start with films that are trying so hard to be a part of the art house genre. Films that just make no sense and then slap on the "it's an art house film" excuse and call it a day. And there's a smaller horror film I've seen that basically fits this description called We Need to Do Something. It is a film that on the outside has a lot of promise, an interesting title, a unique poster, and a cool plot, but it's the film's uninspired art house direction that led to it being just a copy and paste of about every A24 horror film to come out before it. I know for a fact that they were hoping A24 would pick this up for distribution. I think one of the major offenses about this movie, though, is that it is just so boring. Everything that happens in this film is to serve the plot. The characters are incredibly unlikable, and the scary parts are hilarious.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
I'm a good boy.
Nothing feels earned, and it makes sense why so many people just absolutely hated it, myself included. Now let's look at another film, and perhaps this is one you may have seen. Smile. Smile was a big hit. It had an original idea, it had lots of big scares throughout its runtime, but the film's paranormal allegory for trauma and mental health is yet another rehashing of the same theme that we have seen thousands of times before. The Babadook, Hereditary, Get Out, Martyrs, It Follows, and I could just keep going. Now, why do I give a pass to these films for having the same theme but not to Smile or any other film? It's the way they present it. Not just through the film's horror, but it's because of what these films have to say. In Smile, the main character is slowly losing her mind after witnessing a grisly suicide. Okay, simple enough. You could probably come to the conclusion already about what this film is trying to say. But the problem is the effort the Smile team made to explore this concept like these other films. They didn't. In Smile, the main character is dealing with the trauma of witnessing her mother's suicide as a child. Then finding out about this paranormal smile trauma monster that can only be passed on if you kill yourself in front of someone else. This leaves almost nothing to explore, as the film has literally held your hand through discovering its meaning. There is a reason that these films are still talked about today, and movies like Smile don't get further discussion past the car ride home from the cinema.
We'll have you talking long after the credits roll.
I'm sure Parker Finn was really proud of himself. So yeah, the main protagonist has to go to her old house to face her past trauma before it consumes her and kills her.
Have you considered the reason you feel stuck could actually be more about your mother's suicide?
But surprisingly, the film was a success. It's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, audiences were terrified, and critics raved about it.
The #1 movie in America.
So I have to ask one question. What makes this film scary? Is it the smiling? Certainly not. I find this shit hilarious. The only answer I could come up with is the film's jump scare. It's fucking boring. Now, films like It Follows do have jump scares, but I believe that they earned them by setting up their sinister atmospheres and then grabbing us by the throat. Smile, on the other hand, jump scares the audience every 5 fucking minutes because they were zoning out. I've said this a million times in the past, and I'll say it again. I personally think one of the scariest films of all time is Hereditary. I've seen this more than 10 times, and it never fails to deeply unsettle me. Rather than making you jump, the film decides to take its time to get under your skin and disturb the living shit out of you. Smile never earns its jump scares. In fact, they get really fucking annoying.
Holly.
I could rewatch Hereditary over and over and still be terrified. But if all your film has to offer is jump scares, then by a second or third watch, you're going to know when it's coming. I don't even think a film has to necessarily scare the shit out of me for it to be a great horror film. Most recently I saw Talk to Me, and it's one of the most unique takes on paranormal horror I've seen in years. And I wasn't even scared while watching it. What this film has to say and the way the directors go about telling it is way more impressive to me than how many times I shat my pants. I feel like one of the major trends I see in modern horror right now is legacy sequels. And we can thank David Gordon Green for that, who's directed both the recent Halloween films and is now moving on to The Exorcist to make another trilogy of films. Now, I remember being pretty hyped for the first Halloween film in 2018, and it kind of delivered. It's not a great film, but a pretty decent legacy sequel. Then the other two films came out and they were both horrendous. And I haven't even seen the new Exorcist film, but based on the god-awful trailers and everyone's reactions, I just know it's shit. What about these films makes them appealing to watch? I understand these properties have massive fan bases behind them, so of course people will see them. But their stories are pointless and they make such a horrible attempt at modernizing these legendary horror films. Like, could you imagine a modernized remake of Saw in the year 2044? It would be pointless. There's no reason we should be remaking or giving these legacy sequels to some of the greatest horror films of all time. It leaves the originals with a weird feeling when I go back to them. Like, now I can't watch the 1974 Halloween without thinking about the 2018 continuation. And even the way they ended this trilogy is terrible. In the original, it ends as the killer, Michael Myers, escapes and is still on the loose. It's an incredibly effective ending, and I couldn't imagine how it felt to see this in the 70s. In Halloween Ends, the finale is Michael Myers finally dies, they have a parade with his body, throw him into a fucking wood chipper, and the evil is gone. Or is it? I don't give a shit. The problem with modern horror is not these films. It's the ones who have tried to replicate that kind of horror in a way that is cheap, rehashed, and uninspired. Many people might sneer at A24 because of their reoccurring styles of horror, and I would kindly disagree. The specific horror films this studio chooses to distribute all follow similar but different formats. They are all individually effective in their own ways. I look at recent incredible original films like Barbarian, The Lighthouse, Hereditary, Titan, all of Jordan Peele's movies, and I could keep going. The future of cinema and horror worries me. Sometimes I wonder if in my lifetime I'll see the closure of all cinemas for good. But there's a huge part of me that has hope for modern horror to reclaim its power to haunt and unsettle audiences in ways that go beyond the closing credits. There's so much more I could say about why many modern horror films are so terrible right now. But I feel like I've been talking for long enough, and if I kept going I'd sound like a broken record. Well, now that I'm done recording the audio for this video, I'm gonna go see Thanksgiving in theaters. I'll be right back. Wish that end part was a joke, but it's not. Oh well.